And welcome to Silverstone. Hello and welcome here on Eurosport from John Watson and Allard Kalf. We are just about to start the first official qualifying session for Sunday's British Grand Prix. This morning, 2 times 45 minutes unofficial, and Michael Schumacher was fastest, Rubens Barrichello a brilliant second, Ukyo Katayama third, and Damon Hill fourth, just in front of Eddie Irvine. John, an unusual top 5 and a lot of drama.
Indeed there was, but that 1.5 hour session that held this morning, Michael Schumacher just reinforcing the form that we saw some 2 weeks ago during that 3-day test. But what is interesting to me, and I think to many people here, and there's a huge crowd that have come to Friday qualification, was that Rubens Barrichello and his Jordan Hart and Ukyo Katayama in the Tyrrell Yamaha were very, very close together indeed, but also much closer to Schumacher than they were some 2 weeks ago. Now those teams say, we never really got a good run over those 3 days. Hard to believe that when you're here for 3 days you can't get a good run, but with so much work to do, that is often the case. But I think the main talking point this morning was around Damon Hill, who left the pits, drove up to Beckett's, and then found something happened to the front suspension on both sides of his car, something I've never seen before, and in effect the suspension, part of the suspension, became detached from the chassis, and obviously a very embarrassing situation, potentially dangerous for Damon Hill and for the Williams team. And the official answer to the problem was an assembly problem, and I would think that well, the person or people involved in that error will certainly not be feeling particularly comfortable today or for the future. But luckily, as Damon Hill himself said, well, I was quite fortunate that it just happened at this part of the circuit. He'd only just left the pits and was going through the sequence of bends up at Beckett's, and he's got total faith in Williams' ability to prepare a race car, and he didn't even have time to get scared. That was his quote. So Damon sat most of that session out, had about 6 laps. In fact, the outcome of that was that Damon got into the car, went ballistic, did 5-6 flying laps, was superb, and ended up being 4th quickest.
We're watching Martin Brundle, the first car out on the circuit. Martin 10th this morning on 1:29.167, and that is 1.7 seconds slower than the fastest man, Michael Schumacher. Martin going through a sequence of corners, new corners here at Silverstone. The circuit, John, I think if we compare the circuit to last year, let's say 75% of the corners are new.
Well, there's been a major look at circuit safety and entertainment at Silverstone, and this corner cops, that's the first of many changes around the circuit. If we just maybe can follow Martin as he comes through, you can see revised curbing on the entry into Beckett's again. This new curbing, which was introduced at Silverstone, which is an effort and a successful one to prevent the kind of situation that we saw in Imola when Rubens Barrichello went over what looked a fairly shallow curb but launched him up into that barrier. Second major change into Stowe, 3rd gear corner. You can see very easy indeed to let the back end of the car slide. Now it's straight down Vale, braking, and a wider entry into the first part of Club. Second part is as it was last year, and from Club then it's all the way up into Abbey. Now Abbey is now a 3rd gear corner as opposed to a flat out in 6th gear corner. Well, there they are, the happy looking couple, David Coulthard and companion. And this now back into bridge, but here on the edge of the bridge, Ferrari corner is being brought much closer to bridge, and then Brooklands again a tighter corner than previously. Luffield 1, which is where Brundle is now, entering Luffield 2, they remain unchanged, and then it's the dash down through Woodcote and across start finish straight, and that is a flying lap from Martin Brundle, and the time 1:29.966,
which is 0.8 of a second slower than Brundle managed this morning. There Damon Hill waiting for his car to be ready to go, and he's probably looking at himself now.
Yes, well, it's amazing the reaction that we see. Damon much more relaxed than he was some 2 hours ago. Gerhard Berger getting now his 2nd lap, because Poor old Gerhard Berger, it always seems to happen to him. He went out on his first lap, and one of these very revised Ferrari engines just failed. So Berger really getting his first laps of the revised Silverstone circuit. He's got to learn new braking points, new entry points, new exit points of this revised Silverstone circuit.
Gerhard Berger on his first flying lap. And Gerhard, as John said, the only man who did not record a time this morning during the 1.5 hour untimed session. Brundle 29.966. Johnny Herbert on his first flying lap, now into second, a 1:31.797, but fastest man now, and it's all changes. Gianni Morbidelli, a 1:29.896. Gianni Morbidelli had a puncture this morning and then run out of fuel. Glorious day at Silverstone, John, 23 degrees, and if we compare this with last year, I think there's quite a few people more.
Well, a much larger crowd for Friday's qualification, but just looking at that camera shot, it was a great view of what it's like to go through Bridge Corner. Now, Bridge Corner this year is slower because of the revisions to Abbey. You approach it accelerating. It is flat out, but it's not an easy flat out corner. Because the speed is lower, you therefore have got a lot less downforce. This is the irony of downforce and the way it works. Well, Berger really just learning the circuit, and it's a critical time because as well as having to qualify, he's only got 12 laps, so he's got to make the best of it. He's got to be cautious. He can't afford to take too many chances. He's not really learned this circuit. Ferrari were one of 4 teams that did not come here for the Grand Prix test that was held 2 weeks ago. 0.9 slower at the first intermediate point. Berger currently 5th quickest, 1:34.727. Expect to see maybe a 1.5 or 2 second improvement on this lap.
Martin Brundle has improved to a 1:28.869, and second is Gianni Morbidelli on a 1:29.896, so just over a second slower. Johnny Herbert currently in third, a 1:30.995, and for Herbert that's a couple of tenths quicker than he went during the morning session.
Well, in fact, Martin Brundle has improved on his time from the morning. He's gone 0.3 of a second faster as teammate Mika Häkkinen exits Kopp's corner, and this is a corner where you really can see how effective Grand Prix brakes are. I stood there for 3 days and was just in awe of the ability for a Grand Prix car to slow down in a distance which, look, frankly, is ridiculous. Martin Brundle, in fact, was the most impressive because he was the latest on the brakes. He was also the quickest through that sequence. He was at 285 kilometers per hour before he got on the brakes. Kopp's, of course, if you make an error now, the exit of the circuit considerably narrower than it was previously, so it's a very critical corner. And not least of all, when on Sunday the Grand Prix, 26 cars take the start, there is not the luxury, as in previous years, of a very wide exit.
Häkkinen 1.3 seconds slower than Martin Brundle was at the same point a couple of laps earlier, but then it's Mika's first flying lap.
And you can just see how when you exit Bridge, probably doing about 250, 260 kilometers per hour, drivers now staying much more
To Eurosport from Silverstone, and I understand we had a little sound problem, so we're here and it all works, and we're watching Pierluigi Martini. Mika Häkkinen is currently fastest in front of Martin Brundle, Pierluigi Martini, Gianni Morbidelli and Gerhard Berger in fifth. We haven't seen neither Schumacher or Hill out on the circuit, and Damon, John, I think raring to go after that very troubled morning session he had.
Well, I think Damon benefited greatly from the 3 days of testing which he took part in, so the loss of the majority of morning session, while it is a loss on the day, the team are more than able to compensate for. So Damon, while he was initially disappointed, was delighted with his time at the end of that 1.5 hour session this morning.
Irvine moves into second position, 1:28.502, some 4/10 away from his morning best. But basically, that was Eddie's first flying lap, John. But he came in and out.
Well, the other factor, of course, is that now, almost 1:15 in the UK, it's getting a lot warmer than it was at 9:30, so track temperature changing, and again Goodyear have provided their B compound tyre. Now we remember back just to 1 week when we saw in qualifying the character of the tyre really was acting very much like that of a qualifying tyre. You had one quick lap, that was your first flying lap. So Mika Häkkinen, for example, went out on his first flying lap, got a 27.983, which is still currently quickest. Subsequent laps were slower, and he's now back into the pit. And I have a feeling we're going to see a repeat of what we did see 1 week ago. And it is really going to be very much a case of choosing your time to get onto the circuit, not have other cars around you. Get a clean lap, ensure entry and exit is absolutely perfect, and the time will flow.
David Coulthard starting his first lap after some 14 minutes into the session. So Coulthard on his first lap, and we just caught a glimpse of Damon Hill getting into his car. There's Pierluigi Martini, there's David Coulthard, and oh boy, he is trying.
Well, David had problems this morning also, a rear wheel nut seized on, and that shortened his 1.5 hour session. And in fact, David ended up 7th quickest. You see there already a small improvement on Mika Häkkinen's provisional fastest time. Now coming down, you see that some drivers you're going to see here throughout qualifying, but I'm not sure in the Grand Prix. With the change on the entry to the left-hand part of Club, the old part of the circuit is there. Some people are using it, they're going very wide. Come the Grand Prix, I think people will not do that, because in doing so they invite a following car to slide under them and take the corner away. Something to look out for on Sunday afternoon.
Coulthard currently quicker than Häkkinen's best. He's got to finish a lap, but the split times did say so. This morning he did a 28.569, but as John said, only 11 laps after a troubled session for David Coulthard. So Coulthard finishing his first lap, 27.698. That is nearly 3/10 quicker than the previous best set by Mika Häkkinen. So Coulthard tops the list for the moment.
And that, Allard, is almost a second faster than David achieved this morning. And now look, big commitment going into Beckett. A little bit wide on the apex on the entry, but the guy, he just puts his head down. That is the signal that I always see in David Coulthard. When he's serious about his motor racing, his head goes forward 3/10 quicker than already he achieved here the lap before.
John, there, lost a little time there.
That's the problem on the exit of Stowe. The track comes back in. It isn't a 90-degree corner. The outside of the track cuts back in. So if you get wide there on the exit, there is curbing. And if you drop your wheel over the curbing, then you're into the dust and dirt. He lost a tenth in that section of circuit, just 2/10 quicker than on his previous lap. Now it's really a matter of just finishing the lap, and well, he's backed off. He decided that, in fact, those little errors, little compromises on the exit of Stowe were just too much. He still may well have made a small improvement. Now maybe he wants to try to retain some of that tyre's performance, pick it up and go again, and that's what he's doing. The view down into Copse. A shame we can't see that high view of the corner, because the profile of the corner is quite a lot different from previous Grand Prix. Damon Hill just waiting for that clear moment on the circuit. And after a lot of controversial press comments in the UK press between the French Grand Prix and yesterday afternoon, Damon was actually heard to raise his voice and say, look, give me a break, guys. I'm doing the best I can. You know, you write these stories. What am I supposed to do? I can't do more than I'm doing.
David, closing on the Sauber, I think it is, John. Coulthard is quicker. Häkkinen second, Irvine third, fourth Martini, fifth Brundle, and sixth currently Verstappen.
Well, he's about the same amount of time at the same point of the circuit as he was in his previous lap. He aborted that lap. Now he's decided to run with it. And it's in these very slow and tight corners, Ferrari and Brooklyn, it is so easy to overdrive, to push too hard going in and get understeer, try to chase the throttle, get big rear end slide oversteer. Can he improve on 27.6?
Well, lost a lot of time there, John. Lost 4/10 in the last section.
Well, Alan, I would say, your fellow countryman once again is off the track. Alan, now, we saw him on 3 separate occasions in the French Grand Prix. This time it may be simply a mechanical problem, but we might get a little view. You can see the car beat Martin Brundle, Mika Häkkinen have a little view on their monitors. And that's more disappointment for the Benetton team. And we see what happens. Jos Verstappen coming down into Abbey, loses it under brakes, back end takes over control, the car spins into the gravel bed, and that's the end of the session for Jos Verstappen. 6th quickest presently with a 1:29.142, but that's not going to be good enough to keep him in 6th place with less than half the session already run.
There we see David Coulthard, no doubt. Well, he's still on it, John. I thought he was going to come in.
Well, one of the factors that teams here really are coming to terms with, there's a lot of new tarmac down on the circuit. That will mature, and with the more running, the more the circuit's going to develop a line or groove. So it may well be that, unlike what we saw in France a week ago, David may feel that there is more life in the tyres than just that one quick lap. But I still believe your first flying lap on a fresh set of tyres has got to be your best chance to make an improvement.
40 minutes to go in the first qualifying session for Sunday's British Grand Prix. David Coulthard is currently fastest, Mika Häkkinen second, Eddie Irvine third, Gianni Morbidelli fourth, and in 5th position, Pierluigi Martini. Welcome back with Damon Hill. He was half a second quicker than David Coulthard on the second intermediate, but I think, John, that little, well, maybe misunderstanding with Beretta cost him the lap.
Allard, that was no misunderstanding. Damon was being extremely purposeful. He wanted to get ahead of Beretta, but he had to go very deep indeed into the Abbey corner. He got on the brakes. He was offline in doing so. And of course, offline there's bits of rubber and other bits on the circuit. That gets onto your tyres and you lose grip. He overran into the corner. He actually backed off from that point and has gone through the whole process for the second time. But it was a great shame because it was a great lap from Damon Hill. It was his first flying lap on his new tyres, and as I've said, I suspect the first flying lap will be your best. Damon is now hoping that he's got a clear field ahead of him at least to drag something out on this second lap and maybe make it Williams provisionally fastest, and well, just over half a second. So all Damon Hill now requires, you see again running very wide indeed, catching the curb in the exit. The car snaps back, using part of the old track into Club Corner, waiting for that second intermediate time. He was half a second quicker at the first. Has he maintained it? Has he extended it? He has.
Extended it to 0.6 of a second, while David Coulthard is still the quickest, and Häkkinen, Barrichello and Irvine third and fourth.
Well, on the exit of Abbey, the back end of Hill's Williams was dancing, and I don't think Damon was lifting off. He said, sod it, I'm just going to drive through that problem. Coming into Luffield 1, Luffield 2, and now a clean exit, very important indeed. Wide over the exit, just drops the wheel into the dirt, but has he managed to snatch away provisional pole? 27.372, he has.
Well, John, I think it's safe to say that on your second lap, the end of your second lap, the rear tyres start to go a little bit.
Well, I think if you're working the car as hard as Damon is, and he's still going for it, he hasn't said, that's it. He's still trying to find improvement. Traction, of course, with the revised circuit has taken on a different emphasis. Many more lower speed corners, lower gear corners. Well, fractional improvement down at the first intermediate point, that's into Stowe. Again, you see the problem that Damon is just using the maximum width of the circuit. The danger is in doing that, you might just exceed the limit. The car, and what we're talking about, exceeding the limit. And Damon managed to retain or keep the car on the circuit. Scattered gravel all over the circuit, but has he stalled his engine? And just talking about the loss of back-end grip, that's what happened. It goes ever so quickly. Well, frustration. You can see it written all across that familiar helmet of Damon Hill, and I suspect that that is the end of the session. Damon must be furious with himself. He was going for another lap. Well, has he got movement, or the marshals pushing him?
The marshals are pushing him, John. Now I wonder if the engine's still running, he'll probably be able to engage first gear and come back to the pit.
Well, you've got your fingers and legs crossed, so maybe that will happen. Here again you see, turns in, just got back on the power, the back end just without any warning at all. I mean, no mercy whatsoever. Spun 360 degrees, perfect nose through. The gravel, of course, may not be in the racing line. Here you have a look from the onboard camera. Just turns in, suddenly wallop, back end is out. Damon on the brakes, flipping the throttle. Car then continues its path, coming to a stop just at the edge of the gravel bed. Those are new gravel beds, and Damon Hill, Allard, well done. He's back on the circuit. He's living to run another 2 sets of qualifying tyres, and he's still provisional pole sitter.
We haven't seen Michael Schumacher out on the track yet. We've seen 23 drivers so far, and for the moment it is a Williams 1-2. Häkkinen has moved into third position. Then it's Rubens Barrichello in fourth. Fifth, Eddie Irvine. Sixth, Gianni Morbidelli. Seventh, Pierluigi Martini. Eighth, Frentzen. Ninth, Brundle. 10th, Verstappen. 11th, Johnny Herbert. John, especially Pierluigi Martini and Heinz Harald Frentzen, I think very good performances, because they didn't have the luxury of a 3-day test here.
Absolutely, and you know, when everybody else has been to test and you turn up on the day, particularly to a circuit that has been altered and revised as much as Silverstone 94 is, you are at a disadvantage. Morbidelli in 6th place, Martini, the non-runner, non-tester, and Frentzen in 7th and 8th. As you say, a fine performance. But what we're waiting to see is, what is Ferrari going to do? Jean Alesi and Gerhard Berger. Berger all the way down in 12th. He's completed 8 laps, but of course, as I mentioned earlier, he only managed half a lap this morning, and he is suffering now as a consequence. He's got, in reality, 4 laps remaining in which to make an improvement. Jean Alesi, we haven't seen, certainly he's not in the top 20, not in the top 23.
So Alesi and Schumacher have not been out yet this afternoon. And there's Damon Hill. Flat spots on his Goodyear tires. Well, that's pretty much history then, John?
I think he's happy about that because he's back in the pit. He did keep the engine running. And there's a man, Mr. Confidence, Michael Schumacher, the man absolutely on top of his 1994 season. And the partnership between Schumacher and Benetton has really been just superb from the first Grand Prix in Brazil.
Michael Schumacher, good acceleration out of that corner onto the straight to get the maximum speed down the start-finish straight.
Well, I hope we get to follow this lap, because the kind of almost arrogance that Michael Schumacher showed 2 weeks ago, now watch him coming up out of Copse into Beckett. He is flat out through this right-hand part. He goes flat into the left-hand part, but what he is doing is using his left foot to modulate the speed of the car. The car then is catapulted out of the final right-hand part of Beckett down the straight. He gains so much speed in that part of the circuit. But on this first flying lap, he's 2/10 slower than Damon Hill.
Running over the curve, as we saw Williams of Damon do before. Also off the circuit onto the old pit, and now powering through Club. Very wide, I would say, taking a very wide line, midpoint through Club. But Schumacher has got such a level of confidence. Really, he can drive the car on any part of the circuit, and he knows he's in control. Well, this is the part of the circuit that in Ferrari, where during those 3 days of testing, many drivers ran too late into the corner, tried to very quickly pull the car back, found themselves spinning into the gravel. Schumacher now completing his first flying lap. He was 2/10 slower. Well, he's quickest 1:26.778. He picked up a bunch of time after that first intermediate. Now, if he can make up that time in the first part of the circuit, are we going to see a lap even as quick as a 1:25? If he does, well, I'll be gobsmacked, because this revised Silverstone circuit was meant to be, let's say, 8 to 10 seconds slower than the Grand Prix circuit in 93 and before that. And Schumacher's just rewriting that 2.5 tenths quicker. Michael Schumacher, quickest again here in Silverstone. He's been on pole in Monaco, Spain and Canada. Last week in France it was Damon Hill. But will Schumacher be back here probably for the team, John, his home Grand Prix? Well, 3 tenths quicker. That would be very close to the 1:26 second bracket. And just to let you know, the last qualifier last year, Luca Badua, did a 1:26.2, John.
The revisions to the circuit, of course, have made a major difference to some of the corners. The speed of Abbey, of course, used to be flat and top. Bridge, likewise flat and top. But this is a masterful and unbelievable and almost just demoralizing performance from Michael Schumacher. A further almost 3 tenths quicker, 1:26.488. Absolutely unbelievable. And I can just imagine everybody in the pit lane who thought, well, maybe we have caught up to the Benetton. Schumacher has gone out and said, listen, boys, I'm the man. You think you're closer to me? Let me just set the record straight.
Schumacher, this is his third flying lap, and he's backed off. He will go back into the pit at the end of this lap. So Schumacher, 1:26.488. Damon Hill and David Coulthard, second and third. Fourth, Mika Häkkinen. Fifth, again, a good performance by Ukio Katayama. Now in sixth position, the Ferrari of Jean Alesi, with Barrichello and Irvine, 7 and 8. Ninth, Mark Blundell, and Mark is only 0.3 of a second slower than the man in fifth place, teammate Ukio Katayama, and in 10th, Gianni Morbidelli.
So Jean Alesi in the 412 T1 stroke B, and this has got a brand new titanium gearbox, cast an absolute mint, lighter, which gives the car better weight distribution. Also the E5A94 engine, and Alesi now back right out of it. That last lap, 2/10 slower than his best. Improvement from Martin Brundle. He's up to 6th place, 1 minute 28.244. So times suddenly moving around, and we're only halfway through this session.
We've seen 27 cars on the circuit so far, with Gasio being 27th and Belmondo being 26th. Then it's Gunon and Brabham 24th and 25th in the Simtek. And the man I'm missing at the moment, John, is Christian Fittipaldi, who has not done a lap so far.
Well, Alesi going very slowly indeed, and one suspects, we have to wait and see, is he just giving those tyres an opportunity to recover? I suspect that he is. I think if he had been coming into the pits, he would have been going probably a bit quicker. And there the man who second quickest this morning, Rubens Barrichello, driving for the local Silverstone Grand Prix team, that's Jordan Grand Prix. And Barrichello, his time this morning, 1:27.935, and that time would make him fifth quickest if he could repeat it.
Well, he's fourth quickest now, John, with the 27.890. He's just done outside of the camera.
And he did say after that run this morning, through this corner, I didn't go flat. During the test, I could. And maybe that's just for that little bit of additional time has been found.
The classification after some 36 minutes, coming past on your screen. There we see Rubens Barrichello fourth and going for another lap. This was, I think, a slow lap, John. And Rubens starting his 10th flying lap.
Well, the young Brazilian, very familiar indeed with Silverstone, and look, very quick into Beckett, and just watching Barrichello likewise trying. In fact, the Jordan chassis has got the ability, if you want a left foot brake you can. They've got a very broad brake pedal. Barrichello, like many young Grand Prix drivers coming out of karting, so not a difficult adaptation to make.
Rubens Barrichello, 0.4 of a second slower than Michael Schumacher on the first intermediate. What is it going to be on the second intermediate? A full second so far. He's lost quite a lot through the corners there, John.
I think also on horsepower terms, he hasn't quite got the power of the Z-Tech R or the RS6B, the qualifying version of the Renault engine, which runs some 500 RPM higher than the regular race engine, and hopefully would give a corresponding amount more horsepower.
was that dust, or was that something coming out of the engine?
I think he took a slightly different line into Woodcote, and I think it looked like cement dust on the circuit. Maybe there was some oil dropped at some point, and it didn't look to be, it wasn't a normal, if you like, line that I've seen Barrichello take through Woodcote before. He was a little bit closer into the curb, and maybe just something there that had been put down to cover fluid that had been dropped by another car.
Eddie Irvine also on the circuit at the moment. Eddie being 7 tenths slower than Barrichello, the man he out-qualified last week in France. Heinz Harald Frentzen on the track. Jos Verstappen is on the track. Well, his car is on the track. The driver isn't. Well, off the track now, but I mean somewhere on the circuit. Herbert on the circuit, and that's about it, I think, John. Yep, it's Pauli. Finally, Christian, we see him.
Well, provisional pole man Michael Schumacher, composed and confident. Damon looking very deep in concentration and in thought, and he's got to find, well, 0.7 or so of a second just to match Michael Schumacher. As we look at Ulster and Eddie Irvine, and last night Eddie Irvine came to Shea Watson. We fed him up on chicken legs, chops, sausages, and I hope it doesn't affect his performance this afternoon.
Well, actually, John, Eddie was in a very good mood last night. Fairly relaxed and raring to go for his home Grand Prix, I suppose.
Well, I wasn't so impressed because he nicked my baked potato. But Oxford-based Eddie Irvine, almost the most resident British Grand Prix driver, coming up now to compete a flying lap, 28.106, improvement up to 7th place, just over 2 tenths slower than teammate Barrichello. And really, Barrichello and Irvine have pushed each other along throughout the season. In the French Grand Prix 1 week ago, Irvine had the honours of being the quicker of the two. Right now, Barrichello has that position. Some 20 minutes remaining of the first qualifying session on Friday afternoon. And Irvine and Barrichello both with one more set of tyres.
So, Schumacher leads Hill, Coulthard, Barrichello, Hakkinen, Frentzen, Irvine, Katayama, Brundle and Alesi. We'll be back pretty shortly here on Eurosport. Welcome back on Eurosport, back with Michael Schumacher. Currently pole position 1:26.488 and going very slowly indeed. Well, is he just trying to find a gap? I wonder. I think he is. But John, moved up into second position is Heinz Harald Frentzen in the Sauber Mercedes, in front of Damon Hill and David Coulthard in the Williams Renault.
Well, just as we went to commercial break, the time flashed up on our Tag Heuer computer, and we just looked at each other and said, is that real? But it is real. Heinz Harald Frentzen, only 2 tenths or 0.8 of a second slower than this man, Michael Schumacher.
In his Benetton Ford, still quickest, but Barrichello 5th, Irvine 6th. The times identical to the thousandths of a second, John. But Barrichello's 5th because he set the time earlier.
Yes, but Eddie Irvine is still out on the circuit. He has got 1 flying lap remaining. Barrichello's day, his work is finished. He's going to sit in the pits. Is he going to get a dose of the same medicine he had 1 week ago? Well, Irvine has to do it on the set of tyres he currently is on. He cannot come in and take one more fresh set. But watch Schumacher blinding through Beckett's. I mean, anybody who's going to come here over the weekend should go up there and have a treat that is just wonderful to watch.
Michael Schumacher coming up to the first intermediate point, and he is a tenth of a second quicker than he was previously. So, John, I think the question is not going to be what's the time? Well, the question is, are we going to get in the 25s, basically? Whoops, small mistake there.
Little error into club, but he looked a real treat as he came out of Stowe. He got it absolutely perfect. he's lost time. That little mistake, that little error in club has cost him, and in fact he's backed off. No, he's just going into Abbey. He knows in himself whether the lap can be improved upon. If he thought that that error in club was going to cost him time, he would have backed off. He still believes he can shave maybe a tenth or a couple of tenths off his present 126.488. Again, in Luffield, running over that curb. On the exit, it doesn't matter so much of Luffield 2.
Well, and he's found a bit of time there on the last part, John.
I don't know why Schumacher, he's so much quicker in reality from club right back to coming across the line at Woodcote than anybody else. And even if he has an error on a lap, he still picks up time. I mean, the car, the driver, and look, big swerve into Beckett's. He's got that level of confidence coming past Gerhard Berger. Now down into Stowe. Again, exit critical. We watched Damon Hill getting very wide and sort of being snapped back across the circuit. Schumacher just about perfect. This is where he made an error on the previous lap. Still not, in my opinion, quite up to the normal Schumacher standard, but certainly better than the last lap. This looks to me as if he can take another couple of tenths off that last lap improvement.
Michael Schumacher coming out of Abbey, going through Bridge. And this is a sequence of corners where he made up a lot of time on the previous lap. But now, ooh, that's nicer, that Minardi. Coming across the line in about 5 seconds from now. And will it be a quicker lap? Well, thank you very much. The timing is gone. We look on our screen, 26.323. Again, improvement from Michael Schumacher.
While going down the field, Heinz Harald Frentzen, his qualifying effectively over. As we see Damon Hill pop out of the pits, he now knows what he's got to do. But Schumacher's still got laps left.
Schumacher on his 8th flying lap. John, that's enough time to go back into the pits, get a new set of tyres and go again.
Well, I would say this lap will see him go into the pits. I suspect he ought to, if he has got the chance to make one final lap. That would be my particular strategy.
Well, John, we see Irvine in 5th and 6th on our screen at the moment. And if we keep going on that, then we will see Jean Alesi in 10th. Well, Alesi's moved up to 2nd on a 1:27.181. There's the man. His previous lap just under a second slower than Michael Schumacher. And again, Ferrari being one of the teams that has not been here before.
That makes me wonder, just Ferrari and Sauber have come here and within the space of, let's say, 2 hours, I've got one car on provisional front row and one car on provisional second row. Michael Schumacher. Well, Alesi certainly come into the pit, or Gerhard Berger come into the pits as Alesi comes now into Bridge.
Well, Alesi, he's been quick as of, well, he's always been quick, but the car has performed better from Canada onwards. New revisions in Magny-Cours, and he is coming into the pits as well. With 11.5 minutes remaining, David Coulthard out on the circuit, just started another lap. Also, there we see Ukyo Katayama. Katayama currently 8th position. And Katayama being very quick or very high up the list this morning. A new J2 spec Yamaha engine in the back of that Tyrrell. And there's David Coulthard. Well, David, that's definitely not the way to go. Is he going to come straight? I suppose he'll be straight back into the pits, John.
Yes, I would say so. He's That was his 7th lap, so he can afford to come back into the pits. And that looked like he made a mistake on the entry into Ferrari. And that just shows the level of difficulty. You push hard, you brake just that fraction too late, you miss the turn-in point, and then it's a trip across the gravel. And, well, David Coulthard has got time to come in, put another set of tyres on, but it just knocks your confidence.
With 10 minutes to go, the Benetton Ford of Michael Schumacher leads the Ferrari of Jean Alesi, then the Sauber Mercedes of Heinz Harald Frentzen, both Williams Renaults 4th and 5th, then Rubens Barrichello and Eddie Irvine, identical times in a Jordan Hart, and then it's Katayama in a Tyrrell Yamaha, just in front of a Peugeot pair of Häkkinen and Brundle. Well, John, Damon Hill, I think, is waiting.
Well, Mark Blundell very unhappy indeed with Eric Comas. Blundell on a flying lap, Comas coming out of the pits, and Mark decidedly and indicating how unhappy he was with the degree of cooperation that Comas gave him. Fittipaldi on a flying lap trying to avoid all the traffic. Well, it's inevitable at some point somebody's going to suffer. And in spite of and Fittipaldi, the back end just snapped away. He got it back under control. Fittipaldi 15th and 1:29.200. Well, certainly the top 9 are all sitting in the pit lane, but those that have really completed their afternoon's qualifying are Barrichello, Irvine, Katayama. Mika Häkkinen has completed 6 laps. Brundle out on the circuit has completed 8, is on his 9th. Blundell only 7 laps, and Pierluigi Martini, who's in 12th place, with his works finished as well.
It's in Martin Brundle in 10th, and if we look at the other end of the list, it's not qualified for the moment. David Brabham, Paul Raimondo, and Brabham is out on the circuit of those two. Both Williams in the garage. And I think we're both waiting for either a Williams or a Benetton to come out, John.
Well, Schumacher is the only Benetton running because Verstappen, we saw earlier, stuck it into the gravel beds. It's the first time for him this weekend. He's got to beat 3 to improve upon his record from the French Grand Prix. And of course, Damon Hill, who's only completed 4 laps. And Damon, one suspects, sitting there feeling the responsibility that he carries here as the lead British driver in terms of competitiveness, followed by Eddie Irvine, Martin Brundle, Johnny Herbert, Mark Blundell behind Martin Brundle, and Johnny Herbert in the Lotus all the way down in 17th place. Well, that's an unusual line, wasn't it?
Yeah, I wonder whether that was being a little late on the brakes or just trying something different.
Well, I think if you're on a qualifying run, you don't get the luxury of, in fact, trying too many new lines. So I suspect it was just a little bit of going in too deep into Brooklands corner. Oh, a study of concentration. As Damon Hill now prepares for what I would suspect will be his fall. And in fact, with the time remaining, is going to be his final qualifying effort. And this ought to be interesting because Damon currently in 4th place, needs to find just over 0.2 of a second to put herself back on to the front row of the grid.
Well, we are watching Mika Häkkinen currently in 9th position, 9th and 11th here, John. That is not what McLaren or Peugeot wants. And I suppose it's not for the lack of trying of either Peugeot, McLaren or their drivers, to be honest.
Well, I think McLaren were very happy with the work they did here 2 weeks ago. And basically this morning they were also pretty pleased with things in general. But this session considerably quicker, and they're going to have to dig pretty deep to pick up position. Mika Häkkinen in 9th place. He's on his 8th lap. And Olivier Panis showing us that even with the change of ownership, it is possible to still spin a Ligier Renault.
Damon Hill about to go through the section of the circuit where Michael Schumacher seems to pick up a lot of time, with just under 4.5 minutes to go. And Damon will have, I think, 2, maybe 3 laps, John, to try and do something about it.
But he just needs that one clear lap which he can put together as near to perfection as a racing driver, in fact, ever can do. He only needs to find 0.2. I say only needs to find. Those 0.2 to a driver sometimes can be like 2 minutes. But it's a question of being economical, but controlled and aggressive. And it's through corners like Beckett's, and especially the last part, that final right-hander, that dictates your top speed down Hanger Straight, then into, and look, Allard already faster than Schumacher, that first intermediate point.
So Damon Hill on course maybe to another pole position. Let's have a look at the second intermediate time. Again, Michael Schumacher was very quick in the section after bridge. Well, he's gained a little more.
But Allard, the area where Benetton seemed to me so strong is from this point through bridge, and I think that's because the mechanical side of the Benetton chassis is so good. But Damon Hill pumped up, unfortunately having to go past Mika Häkkinen, and that will have cost him time. That's what he didn't want. But Mika was very cooperative, stayed well over to the right, maybe lost a 10th, just over 1/10 of a second, but that's how close it's going to be as Damon Hill makes it across the line.
Well, he's back on, he's not on the front row of the grid, he's just behind Gerhard Berger, who is in front of Damon Hill and is now in second place. There's the man, Gerhard Berger, on his 12th lap on this revised Silverstone circuit, being 0.4 of a second away from the Benetton Ford of Michael Schumacher.
I'm absolutely delighted for Gerhard Berger. The man sometimes has the most appalling luck. He had it here this morning. He didn't even get one lap in his Ferrari, and here he is on the front row of the grid alongside Michael Schumacher, 0.4 of a second behind Schumacher. That'll bring a smile, and I'm delighted to say, to Gerhard Berger's face.
Damon Hill going through club. I wondered whether Gerhard's Ferrari was, yes it was, well out of the way, so a clear track for Damon Hill, and he is closer to Schumacher than he was on the previous lap.
But what's more important, he's actually probably on stream to put Gerhard Berger back down onto the second row of the grid.
And Jean Alesi, who's now in third position on a 1:26.891. So the Ferrari team being half a second away, roughly, from the Benetton team after only half a day.
Well, this is the kind of qualifying session we love to commentate on. It's great for any Grand Prix. Well, he loses so much time out in that slow section of circuit, and that's an area that the Williams team, you can see in Frank Williams' face, he knows where their car is losing out. That's the area overnight the Williams engineers are really going to have to concentrate on, because they cannot afford to give so much time away to Benetton. For sure, we know are superb everywhere, but now Ferrari, and even Heinz Harald Frentzen in the Sauber, not in the 1 minute 26s, but certainly close enough to challenge.
Well, and Damon Hill being quicker than he's ever been onto the first intermediate, but let's see how quick he can be onto the second intermediate. And there's also Christian Fittipaldi, who is currently 15th.
Well, there's days, oh, look at this traffic all over the place. One of the two Pacifics, Bertrand Gachot, and, well, Bertrand staying well over to the right, but again, it's just a compromise in the lap. You know, there's days when things work for you. There's days when things... Joe and Damon almost in all sorts of trouble as he exited bridge. Got a real tank slapper in the motorcycling parlance, and that really is, I think, just about caps Damon's day. What do I have to do to get my car onto the front row, onto pole position? Damon completing his 8th lap.
Nope. He is finished today in 4th position, behind Michael Schumacher, Gerhard Berger, Jean Alesi, but in front of Heinz Harald Frentzen, his teammate David Coulthard, Barrichello and Irvine, Katayama and Hakkinen. That is the top 10 so far after one day here at Silverstone. World Championship leader Michael Schumacher on the provisional pole position. But John, the gap between Schumacher and the rest is coming down.
Well, I think the greatest thing I can say is 2 Ferraris, second and third. That's something that I've been waiting for years, and certainly I think everybody in motor racing is delighted to see Ferrari competitive again, because for sure having Ferrari competitive is good for Grand Prix racing. Gerhard Berger steps out of his car. That bit of paper in his hand is the piece he received from the scrutineers. His car would have been stopped and weighed at the entrance to pit lane. Gerhard Berger second, Jean Alesi third. Ferrari are on their way back.
Because, as we said before, Ferrari did not have the luxury of 3 days testing here at Silverstone.
Now, Allard posed the question. They didn't have 3 days testing. Berger lost the whole morning. You could see that little wink as he walked past to one of his former team, to Flavio Briatore. That little wink says, I've got you in my sights, Flavio. Now we're going to add a little bit of pain.
Well, if we have to talk about the man of the day, John, I think that's him. Gerhard Berger qualifying provisional second for this Grand Prix. The wrong side of the grid, 27th and 28th, again Gachot and Belmondo, while Gounon has been faster than David Brabham, 25th and 26th. There's Rubens Barrichello. John, would he be disappointed being in 7th position?
Absolutely, because Rubens knew from the morning he had a very good car balance. He knew he could go quicker. The problem is everybody else has gone quicker. I think the one car that's slightly out of context is Heinz Harald Frentzen, but congratulations to Sauber and Mercedes-Benz. They've worked very hard this year to get to a point where they can qualify comfortably back into the top 6. But believe me, the Jordan team, they're not going to be satisfied. They want to be on the front row if it was possible. If not that, the second row. They'll take the third row, but beyond that, they'll be disappointed.
Top 13 on your screen at the moment. The gap, 0.4 of a second between Schumacher and Berger. Then it's Alesi and the rest. There's the rest of the qualifiers after 1 day of qualifying here in Silverstone, with David Brabham being the last and Jos Verstappen in 16th after that early excursion here in Silverstone. So we're ready for a great day of qualifying tomorrow here at Silverstone. Another day, let's hope it's dry. John Watson and Allard Kalf, hope you enjoyed this, and we'll be back.